Hi, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can I call the house to order, as they say? Wow, what a crowd. Great to see you all this afternoon. My name is Bob Taylor, and I've got the pleasure of chairing this first afternoon of the 24th annual Leakage conference. And we're 200 people, sold out, waiting list. So really good support again. So Peter Simpson will be here tomorrow, and he'll chair the full day tomorrow. Actually, somebody said to me, I think it was Ali from Southwest, said to me outside, we're like the Anton deck of the leakage world. So we've got a few Bush Tucker trials lined up later, if anybody would like to engage in any of those. No, only joking. So there's an interesting, a really interesting set of papers that we got for you this afternoon, and then leading in tomorrow. We're going to talk about the Routemap initially, which David Jacobs from Anglian will be leading with a very distinguished panel there. We're going to be talking also to Ofwat to get a regulatory perspective. We're really pleased to get Ian Pemberton's support for today's session. I think Ian always comes to these conferences, but not so often on the panel, right, Ian? So great for Ian to be here. And then we've got another panel later this afternoon talking about innovation projects that have come through the Ofwat Innovation Fund process. And then tonight we have a dinner, as I'm sure you're aware. It's all there in this brochure, so if you haven't got those on your way in, that's where all the information is. I'm sure you've seen that on the website already. So, what are we doing about the questions? We've got roving mics in the room today. We've got Slido for people to use for questions and answers. Is there a Slido name that comes up? It's going to come up later, is it? There you go. That's what you need to do for Slido. I think we have some people joining us remotely as well from outside of the conference, so they will be able to use Slido. And as I said, here you have the microphone as well. We've also got this thing called a thought wall. Now, can you tell me where the thought wall is, Judith?
Out of the conference room, turn around and on the left.
Sort of outside the conference room. I think we've done this before. But for those who are here for the first time, there's a place out there where you can scribble your thoughts and ideas, views, anything you like really on what you're hearing over the next day and a half onto post-it notes and put them on the thought wall outside. It's really important stuff because it helps Judith and the organisers kind of understand what the interests are, what the issues are that people want to talk about at these conferences moving forward. Have I left anything out? There's no fire alarms today, is there? There's no fire alarm exercises today. So if there is a fire alarm, if the alarm goes, you can see the green fire exit signs and follow the hotel staff out, I guess, is the routine. Thank you for that, Judith. Right. So, just a few words of introduction from me. It's an interesting time to be in the water industry, and I'm sure you would all agree with that. I'm talking from I celebrated 40 years in the industry last month, actually, as a young engineer working on leakage in the 1980s, and I haven't got rid of it. It's still part of my responsibility. But it's something that you all know I'm passionate about and I really care about, so that makes it so much easier. So we're going to be talking about the important issues, trends and emerging technologies as we normally would over these couple of days. But you know, these discussions, as I've said, are increasingly important given the challenging year that it's been for the industry and the scrutiny of our sector in terms of performance. So the process that we have with these conferences of coming together, collaborating with one another, sharing knowledge continues to be as important as ever with the challenges that we have today, and we can't solve these things in isolation. Everybody is doing great work in this area and it's got us to where we are today, but there's much more to do, as I'm sure I don't need to tell you. PR24 business plans have gone into Ofwat, and by the way, Ian isn't going to be talking about PR24 today because that process is already ongoing separately. But the plans are for a 96 billion investment programme between all of the water companies in water and wastewater infrastructure between 2025 and 2030. So that's almost double the current levels of investment in this current 5-year period. So we're all getting ready in the water companies to be able to deliver the increase in spend, and working with our supply chains and so on to make sure that happens. So what are we trying to do? Well, we're trying to cut leakage by about a quarter by 2030 compared with where we were at the very start of the decade, which will put us amongst the top 5 countries in Europe in terms of leakage management. We want to build 10 new reservoirs to secure the resilience of our water supplies into the future. We haven't built any major reservoirs, as I'm sure you're aware, since sort of the period immediately post-privatisation, and I'm proud to say that the first one is being built in my own area at Havant Thicket, and we're on site already, and that reservoir is under construction. We're going to invest 11 billion to reduce overflow spills, which is more than triple the current rate of investment, and it's probably the biggest modernisation of our sewerage infrastructure since the Victorian era. And then advanced technology at wastewater treatment works as well to remove phosphorus from the rivers. But there's another key and important area that impinges on all of our work in this room today, which is the area of smart metering. All of the water companies, to some extent, usually a greater extent rather than a lesser extent, are planning a universal smart metering program. We certainly are in Portsmouth Water, and the challenges with that in terms of installation are obviously key. But the other challenge with that is something that we're not kind of used to in our industry particularly. It's not something that we've had ever before and are expert at, and that is the challenge of changing people's behaviour. So it's not an engineering challenge, it's not a technical challenge. Those are all kind of facilitators, those are all the things that you need to help it to happen, but we have to find ways of getting across our messages to our customers about how valuable our water supplies are and how scarce they have become in order to encourage better usage of water, more efficient usage of water. Not to mention the benefits on supply pipe leakage and internal leakage that the smart metering programs will bring, which is another key and important area. And I think increasingly we're starting to realise with the data that we're collecting that this is a much bigger area of challenge than perhaps we thought historically. Another challenge that I will mention as well before I just talk about what customers have said recently is there is definitely a need to show to our customers or tell our customers much more about what we do and explain what we do, because that is the key to restoring trust in the industry and making sure that customers understand why we have to do certain things. And that's as true in the leakage arena as it is in any other areas. Yeah, there are some things that customers simply won't accept. I know it's really difficult for customers to understand the concept that it is uneconomic in some people's view to reduce leakage to zero, for example. There is an economic trade-off here that will have a bill impact, but have we ever tried to explain that well to customers? Well, I don't think we have. I think we've tried, but there's probably much more to be done, and there's more in many other areas as well. And it's not just our customers, it is senior stakeholders in the industry as well. I've had some interesting experiences recently with members of Parliament, for example, who serve in my area of supply, and although we are in the water stress southeast as Portsmouth Water, we've been a little bit of an oasis in that area for historically, but now we are a water stress company as well. But senior people in our communities simply do not understand that. And they're also customers and stakeholders are also quite possessive, I suppose, of their water supplies and where they come from. And they can't understand the need for all of the investment that we're having to move water around the country from areas where there's rainfall and water is not scarce to areas that need it, particularly the east and the southeast. So there is a massive challenge there, a massive communication challenge. And it's incumbent on us all who work in the industry to get that challenge across and explain these things to our customers. It's not just the comms team, it's all of us, to our families, to our friends, in the pub, wherever you get the opportunity. We need to explain these things to people, because that, as I said, is the key to trust in the industry, which has taken quite a big knock over the last year or 18 months. That is the route to it being restored. So, an interesting programme for today. And as part of the price review process, many of you will know that water companies have completed an exercise called Your Water, Your Say, which is where customers get an opportunity to ask questions directly to water company people. We've had 2 of these sessions in my own company, and in fact we're thinking of continuing the concept. It worked really well, actually. But leakage continues to be a top 3 issue. Okay, maybe there is a bit more concern at the moment around river water quality and pollution and so on, but leakage is still up there. So we shouldn't be kind of fooled by the emphasis that the newspapers and so on are putting on the wastewater businesses at the moment. Leakage is still there, particularly, I suppose, for water-only companies like mine. But I can tell you that customers are still very concerned about it. So it's not going anywhere from a customer's perspective. There is still much to do there. We have the Routemap, as you know, that we developed at Water UK level, that gives us the foundations to reach our targets. The main target, of course, is to halve leakage by 2050. And this collaboration that we're talking about today, and are going to see how we're getting on, this is a key part of it. So we're looking forward, and I'm looking forward to the discussions that we have this afternoon, and hopefully the interesting ideas and different thoughts that are coming out to help us in our battles with leakage. I'd like to say a special thank you and a warm welcome to our exhibitors. I think we have a slide. Oh, there it is, showing all of the exhibitors and supporters: Aqualogic, Burmad, Guterman, HWM, Muller, Ovaro, SME Water, Suez, Takura, Technolog, and the Water Report, our media partner. And as if by magic, one of the bosses of Water Report walks in at that moment. Hi Trevor, how are you? And one thing about that list, there's guys on this list who've got some real staying power in our industry. There's companies on that list who perhaps in slightly different forms, were around in the 1980s when I started in this industry. So thanks to all those guys. It's hard work doing all this stuff on leakage, but without the support of companies like these, we wouldn't be able to do what we have to do. So thanks to all of them. Let's give them a round of applause, shall we? Okay, so a few practical things. Firstly, your phones, make sure they're off. I just heard one ringing somewhere down here. You've heard about Q&As with a microphone. You've heard about Slido, so I don't need to say any more about that. Judith, have I missed anything? Don't think so. Okay. Evaluation forms, yeah, in the document. In this document, there are some forms to fill in just to for you to evaluate the conference and give us some pointers for the next one. Okay, let's move on. So I've whittled on for too long. We're going to talk about the leakage Routemap to start with, which is one of the key sort of foundations to reducing our leakage by 50% by 2050. And although myself and Peter tomorrow are chairing the conference, this is not an Anglian Water or a Portsmouth Water piece of work. This is a piece of work that's been done across the industry through Water UK, and Peter and I are, as directors of Water UK, have been the sponsors of this Routemap since it was established, or the public interest commitment, which then gave rise to the Routemap, since it was established about 3 years ago. It's sector-wide. All of the companies are involved. It involves a lot of sharing of information, sharing of innovation, sharing of experiences, and I think you'll hear more about that in a moment. So Without further ado, I'd like to hand over to David Jacobs, who is the Leakage Strategy Manager at Anglian Water, and David and his panel will lead us through this session. Thank you, David.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Wow, great to see a full room again. Pleasure to be here to chair this session on the Routemap that I've been involved with for the last couple of years, and we're going to share progress with you in terms of some of the projects that have been kicked off this year. So the format of the session, got my colleagues over here, so they're going to give you an overview. We'd normally be joined by Joe Parker. Joe's actually working in New Zealand at the moment, so the timings don't really work very well to have Joe on screen or here. So Joe Saunders is going to step in and cover Joe's slot. I'm going to start off by giving you a brief history of the Routemap. Bob's already covered a lot of this, to be honest, so I will be brief. We'll look a little bit about what the industry submitted in terms of our plans for PR24. And then we'll move into the Q&A session after we've heard from the consultants. Okay. So, as Bob alluded to, why are we here talking about the Routemap? Well, 2017, 2018, National Infrastructure Commission under Sir John Arnott reported, and startling conclusion from that report that by 2050, 4,000 extra megalitres a day are needed to make sure that the taps don't run dry. So that kind of sets what we need to do for the foreseeable future. So as an industry, how are we going to make sure that happens? That was when the Routemap was born. It's really a way for the industry to explore, is it technically feasible to drop leakage to that level? Is it cost effective to drop leakage to that level? The Routemap document, you can see on the screen, that sets out the commitment for the industry to reduce leakage by a third by the end of AMP8, so by 2030. And Bob said 25% reduction from the start of AMP7 to the end of AMP8. And it set out a framework for us all to work to in terms of constructing our plans. So when we look at what's in the plans, let's just start off with a little bit of history in terms of leakage. So the blue line is leakage in megalitres a day for the industry, and the orange line is the percentage reduction from the 17-18 baseline. So last year was not great to work in the water industry, managing a water network. The weather was not kind to the water network. Hottest summer on record, followed by a severe winter, worst winter since 10-11. So we saw a bit of an increase in leakage. A lot of companies though saw temporary increases. Actually coming out of the winter, actually started to see all-time low leakage levels, spot leakage levels. So we are making progress. So what do the plans say? Well, the combined plans across the industry, this has all come from the data tables on everyone's websites. 31% reduction planned by the end of AMP8, obviously subject to regulatory approval and funding. So broadly, we've met the aspirations that we set out in the Routemap. Just a little bit in terms of the Routemap project. So we started off, the Routemap was managed through Leakage Public Interest Working Group. Over the summer, the Water UK board has slightly expanded the remit of this group, and it's now been rebranded as the Water Supply Strategy Group. And so the 4,000 megalitres a day saving that we need to make, it can come from leakage, but can also come from PCC effectively, so through water efficiency measures. So we shouldn't deal with them separately. They're all one and the same thing, really, in terms of the targets that we're aiming to get. So it's been brought together in essence, but there's still the leakage Routemap group will report up to this water supply strategy group, and there's a funding route there for future projects that we may need to undertake. So once that group was approved and start of the autumn, signed off some funding to let these guys start off delivering some of the projects that we want to deliver. So we've got five projects in flight now. So you're going to hear about all 5 of those today. So I think probably that's enough from me, and I'm going to invite Glenn up to start talking about the projects in the Prevent area and calm and optimised networks. So Glenn, Director of Technical Consulting, WRC.
Thanks, David. Good afternoon, everybody. Glad to see so many have made it with all the challenges of rail strikes and weather and all sorts of other stuff. So you've got me for the next few minutes talking about Prevent. So the first of the PALM categories: Prevent, Aware, Locate and Mend. And I'm just going to talk about calm and optimised networks. So what we've got here, there are a few aspects to this this particular work stream. One is gathering some data and case studies from the industry. So when you talk about calm networks, there's a lot of good stuff out there. A lot of companies have got some really good examples that they can cite. That's not necessarily an easy thing to sort of do, because calm networks can get quite sort of embedded in lots of other things going on in the networks. It's not a quick before and after thing to make an assessment on. So part of this project's about combining and analysing the evidence. And one of the fundamental things that we're looking to address here is what actually is a calm network. And lots of people talk about it, but good luck finding the one killer definition that explains what that is. It's because of its complexity. I think it needs more than a line or two as a definition. And what we're doing at the moment is just working on a draft standard matrix. And I'll come on to what we're going to do next with that in a slide or two. But I think it's really important to actually be able to convey to each other, if we're moving from A to B, where did we start and where did we end? And how might that differ from a different company that might have some very, very different issues, such as topography, networks. There's all sorts of things. You know, what might work as a calm network in East Anglia might be very different from Scotland, for instance. So I think it's really important that we think about those things and actually start to talk on a consistent basis. And then we're also going to have a look at current practices. As I said, this isn't something that naturally sits nicely with a leakage manager, perhaps, in a water company. It crosses over with quite a number of different stakeholders, capital investment, capital delivery. There's lots of things on the non-infrastructure side of businesses that can have an impact here. So how is all that working? How is it joined together? How are some of the calm networks issues being factored into network design? So one of the outputs here have been a sort of report there to bring a lot of this together. In terms of the key issues, this is just a bit of a recap, really. Physical constraints, third-party requirements, justifying expenditure. When we've done workshops, that's been one of the key things that people have highlighted as being a bit of a barrier. Quite difficult. You need a decent period of time before and after an intervention. And then with that time period comes all the other activities that are going on the network. Lack of understanding, cause and effects can be quite complicated. Whether there's clear policy and strategy, conflicting measures and metrics, and roles and responsibilities we've touched on, so siloed approaches don't necessarily work well in this area. And the lack of common standards and definitions. So data and information, getting some consistency there, as well as recognising that customers themselves are actually part of the holistic system. You know, there could be a factory or any other commercial customer can be quite significant in how that system performs and operates. And then training and experience. Where are we trying to get to? Something that represents best value for the company and its customers. Something that's got real-time monitoring with dynamic and intelligent control. Something that's designed, operated and maintained as a holistic system. Something that's intrinsically calm and resilient as standard. Something that's optimal and understood with clear definitions. Something that's technologically advanced and delivering those optimal low-energy networks. And something that's proactively managed. With clear policy strategy and justification for the expenditure and its needs. So there's a fairly big wish list of things there. in terms of what we're specifically going to do, the three key tasks for this piece of work. The first is developing the standard matrix. We'll come on to sort of what that draft might look like, but the idea being this is going to be an online workshop available to water companies, supply chain as well, to try and get all those different industry views together. With some supplementary guidance notes, and this is to give us that consistent way of measuring and tracking the A to B and comparing against other companies and comparing somebody else's case study to yours on a way that's broadly consistent. So we're trying to work through that lack of definition in terms of carbon networks there, and come up with a matrix and a set of guidance notes. So we've got a framework to work with. Second one on the list, standard template for sharing data and information between companies. Now, it might be tempting to sort of go for a 68-page sort of dossier that collects every bit of information that you could possibly want, but I think the reality is probably something a lot more straightforward that just really captures the key basic information. If somebody's done something, if it was a success or a failure or not sure on the outcome, it'd be great to be capturing that. You know, was it expensive? Was it cheap? Was it quick to implement? Would you do it again? A bit of pre and post data and information. So that's something we sort of really want us to push on with, is getting a template that could then be shared through an appropriate medium. And then finally, the research into current practices across different functions and departments. So this is getting into detail with a few water companies here and interviewing lots of people and actually finding out how much are networks considered, really, both from an operations point of view, but as I said, more in terms of some of those design processes and capital delivery schemes as well. So the approach we're taking, online workshop, just because it's that time of year, you know, travel's a bit of a nightmare, availability's a nightmare, freeze thaw, everything else going on. So online workshop, doodle polls sort of starting to come out now for availability, but this will either be pre or just post the sort of Christmas break, I think more likely. And then we've got 5 or 6 water companies that are sort of volunteered to discuss in greater detail. And this is to then go and talk to different departments, understand where those companies are. Also be releasing a questionnaire as well to gather input from as many different people as we can. So yeah, do get in touch. You know, do approach if you think you're really passionate about this subject and you want to participate. And then just a final couple of slides from me, just on some of the factors that we've started to think about. And what we've sort of got here, I'm not going to read sort of word for word, but there's 2 key things going on in terms of networks, and the level of risk is sort of a key one. You know, what things could cause transients in the first place, but also then there's the energy side of things as well, whether that's pressure, velocity, the magnitude of transients, etc. So we want to try and capture all of those in some form of matrix. So this is just a work in progress. So the idea being, rather than starting with a blank sheet of paper with stakeholders, we figured it's good to start with something. So the team have been putting together some draft options on the matrix. You know, example here, and just sort of going into 3 areas. So we've got the network and assets, some of the root cause factors, and then, as I said, the potential, some of the energy factors there, pressure, transients, etc. We've got velocities, magnitude of transients, duration, etc., time between them, and then mitigation factors, so things like mains material, level of surge protection, how well trained staff are, etc., etc. So the view there to try and put all of those into something that can then provide a score, and hopefully on a reasonably consistent basis between companies, and then this, one of the key things here is to get away from having different conversations where people are saying, actually, yeah, my network's very different fundamentally. It might not be possible to get to the same level as a completely different system due to physical constraints. So at least this starts to reflect: are you doing what you could be doing for that particular system? And then finally, just the sort of appropriate level of detail. And I think, yeah, we're just looking to sort of test what's practical. So we think the matrix plus some other information that isn't necessarily commercially sensitive, but just enough to demonstrate, was it cost beneficial? You know, was there a decent return on investment? Probably erring towards suggesting more of a 2-page summary with some basic information rather than a massive dossier, just to actually get people to fill it in. And then we're looking to set the interviews up to get into some detail. And that is it from me on this Carbon Optimised Network side of things. So over to you, David. Thank you very much.
So just a quick reminder, please be thinking of questions as the presentations go on. We'll have the mics at the end of the session, and also you can use Slido. So thanks, Glenn. I'd like to invite Dean up now. So Dean's Director at Artesia. We're going to talk about what the industry's learning from the smart meters that we've got out installed today. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks, David. Hello, everyone. So I'm going to talk today about what it says here, quantification of background leakage and customer supply pipe leakage. What I'm really going to do here today is talk about what we can learn from smart meter data to help understand and quantify some of those losses and uses that go on beyond the property boundary. So we know that Thames Water and Anglian Water have got some very big smart metering rollout programs ongoing at the moment, but also a number of other water companies have got various trials ongoing. So the main aim of this short project will be to try and collate some of that data and some of that evidence and see what we can learn and share amongst the rest of the industry so that they can make use of that and perhaps make some rapid inroads into reducing demand as they start to roll out smart metering. So just to bring this back to the Routemap, when we were doing the Routemap, we were sort of asked to put a number in as what we felt was the amount of underground supply pipe leakage, and the estimate was around 25%, but really we have no idea. You know, we don't really understand how much water is being lost from that, and you'll hear from Stuart Trow later on. He's doing another project looking at something similar, trying to get to understand the background leakage in more detail. But we're going to look at continuous flow in today's talk, and that I'll go on to what that means in a moment, but effectively it's any flow that is continuous past the property boundary. That could be underground supply pipe leakage, it could be plumbing losses or losses from water devices in the home, like leaking toilets, etc. So we need to reduce leakage to meet the targets in 2050, but also that element of wastage and plumbing losses is important for two reasons. One is that it contributes to night use when we're trying to quantify leakage, but also it's a demand on the system from customers' premises which can be eliminated without really influencing how they use water on a daily basis. So just a bit of definition here. So we've got a property boundary identified on the schematic. There's a meter, smart meter at that boundary. Everything before that smart meter is on company-owned infrastructure. That's water mains, ferrules, communication pipes. After that boundary, we have a customer supply pipe underground. Any leakage from that customer supply pipe is counted towards water company's leakage. And then once the pipe enters the property, any continuous flow, which is losses, which might be plumbing losses or losses from devices, is counted as a consumption. So when we talk about measuring continuous flow, we're really talking about flows that are due to underground supply pipes, flows that are due to plumbing losses and wastage, and also some legitimate consumption, which appears as continuous flow. I'm going to be using some examples in the graphs that follow from both Anglian and Thames, and also from Welsh Water. And these are very early results, so the analysis is still ongoing. So you can read into these what you will, but you won't be able to know, to extrapolate these to continuous flow across the rest of the country necessarily, because there will be some bias in these results, which I'll try and explain as we go through. But firstly, how are we measuring that? Well, we're using smart meters, and most of the smart meters that we've been looking at have got hourly consumption values. And we can use a number of different ways to measure continuous flow, but one of the interesting things is to just check that what they are actually continuous flow, and what is underneath those. So we've also got some very high-res data that Welsh Water's applied to check those out and confirm that what we are measuring is continuous flow. And this is just one example from one property on one day. So I know a lot of the audience are used to looking at 15-minute averages from 1,000 properties at a time. Individual properties look quite different. And what you can see here is a lot of use in the evening period from this property, but also that it never gets down to zero. So this property's got continuous flow running at about 20 litres an hour, which is 480 litres or so a day, so quite significant. Not all properties leak though, or have continuous flow, and this one has got zero continuous flow. And that's good to know. So getting on to some real data now and what we're seeing. So this is some data that Anglian Water provided from a cohort of properties which were already metered and then moved on to a smart meter. The cohort here is fixed on the 1st of April 2021, so you're looking at one cohort of properties. And what Anglian observed was that continuous flow existed in about 8% of the properties when they first started, and then over time customers have reduced either internal plumbing losses, leaking toilets or underground supply pipe leaks, so that at the end of this period there's only 5% of properties have continuous flow, and in that process about 1.5 megalitres a day of water was saved. You will notice also there's a big peak in December 2022, and that's the cold snap we had last year, the freeze for thaw event, and that will raise its head again in a moment. This is a slightly different picture, and one thing to note here is this is looking at all smart metered properties on a daily basis, and so over time the number of smart meters we're looking at goes up. So this isn't leakage or losses increasing dramatically, this is the number of meters we're looking at in this sample going up over time. And what we've done here in this sample is to look at cohorts of flows. So we've got very low flows, blue and orange, and then at the top end we've got flows that are flowing at more than 1,000 litres an hour in brown, and between 100 and 1,000 in pink. So you can see there's quite a range of flows, and what we tend to find is the higher flows have got a much lower incidence and the low flows have got a much higher incidence, and it's a very, very skewed distribution. But you can see some seasonality in there, and there's lots of ups and downs, but again the big one is in the December of 2022 when we had the freeze thaw event, and interestingly here the bulk of that is due to those very large leaks, the ones that are greater than 100 litres an hour in the pink and the brown. When we start to look at sort of flow rates against duration, this plot shows those different flow cohorts, and what we find is the lowest flow cohorts have a shorter duration. The continuous flows with the highest flow have been running the longest. So that might lead you to suspect that they're all underground, but they also exist in unoccupied properties. They also exist in very high occupancy properties, some of those very high flows. So it's a bit of a complex picture. The more you peel back this data, the more you find. If we'd have had time, I could have put another slide in here which showed that if we look at the particular cohort that have volunteered to go onto a smart metered bill very early in the smart metering program, that brown block is virtually eliminated. So they're very quick to fix and resolve continuous flows. We have in this data set a lot of external meters, but we also have some properties that are internally metered. So if we look at the distributions of continuous flow, and this looks at the number of continuous flow events per property per year, we see that the shapes of those are very similar. The external ones on the left have got a much higher incidence of single breakouts, but this sort of leads you to suspect that a lot of that is in plumbing losses as well. And because we can't actually measure the difference between what's going on underground and what's going on in the property, we're still unsure as to how much of that continuous flow is actually underground supply pipe leakage or plumbing losses and wastage in the property. But this picture would tend to lead you to the conclusion that there is quite a lot of that losses are in the property itself. So these are very early pictures. We're currently working on this at the moment, and when the report comes out early next year, I think, Joe, we'll hope to have brought a lot of this together. We'll have looked at different cohorts like unmetered properties and metered properties and try and get a picture of what's going on at a very high level. But the thing I know from looking at this data is that the more you peel away at it, the more you find. And I think this is going to be one of the big benefits from smart metering, is that people are going to have to learn from the experiences going on so they can identify how they can reduce demand effectively and efficiently. So what we've seen when I look at the data from the different areas, there are some similarities between the data we see from Anglia and the data we see from Thames. That isn't too surprising. But there are also quite a lot of biases in the data. So a lot of the data is coming from metered properties at the moment. We do have some data from unmetered properties, and not unsurprisingly, the continuous flow is higher in those. We also need to look at non-households as well. This isn't a phenomenon that just exists in households. Non-households will have continuous flows too, and we're hoping we can get a look at some of the smart meters on non-household properties to get some handle on what that is. I put some numbers here because somebody's going to ask it in the question, how much do you think there is in total continuous flow? I've rather bravely said somewhere between 500 and 1,000 megalitres a day. I think it will be somewhere in that range. I doubt it will be lower, it could be higher, but we'll see. We'll hope to try and improve on that number before we publish the report. So there's clearly a lot of continuous flow, and that means that there's water escaping from underground supply pipes, but also in the plumbing systems and the water using devices that are used in people's homes. And I guess one of the things that comes from this is, this is great to quantify some of this, but really how do we manage that going forward? What do we do about leakage on underground supply pipes? What do we do about all those losses that are on customers' premises? Because they all need to be brought down if we're going to meet some of the demand requirements that we're setting out to achieve by 2030 and 2050. I think I'll stop there, David.
That's great, Dean. Thank you very much. And it's a fascinating area, all this new data we're getting from smart meters. Now I'm going to hand over to Joe Saunders, Technical Director at RPS. I think you've got a double bill, Joe. So you're going to talk about both the work on Locate and the work on Mend.
Thanks, David. So from very, very interesting new data to what we've been doing for the last 100 years, but need to do differently. So ALC, the project around ALCs are very much around how do we measure the ALC efficiency in a sort of one singular way. And again, you heard about Glenn sort of like talking about that one type of data and making sure that we can compare and contrast against people. Also around how we trial new technology as well. The one thing that I've heard so many times when we've been at spring meetings or off-water innovation meetings or UCWEAR things is that everyone's got to try the technology once. We did a trial last week. Oh, fantastic. We're doing one next week. Like, how can we do it in a more scientific way? So maybe each company and each trial is slightly more sort of expensive, but you're doing far less trials in that respect and getting more data and more insight for everyone in that respect. And then also talking around case studies, and the Spring website will be the host of all of the case studies, so the ones that Glenn talked about, also some ones around ALC that we'll be collating as well, some around CSPL, and then also some of the ones about asset management as well. So all of those will go on the Spring website. That's hopefully ready to go once all these are done around March time as an update. So what are the issues that we've got with KPIs at the moment? Don't align to international standards, as Dean's already pointed out. We do count supply pipe leakage, whereas internationally they don't. We do not include water that's consumed illegally, whereas that again is just non-revenue water internationally. So how do we get those sort of alignment so that we don't have the Guardian article or the Daily Mirror article saying, oh, it's so much leakage over here and so much leakage over here, but without actually understanding where they are. When we did the workshop, there was a lot of evidence about them driving the wrong behaviours as well. So we're not driving the correct behaviours around ALC technologies and efficiencies. There was also a lack of understanding from a group of people of what they actually meant and how, like, again, when you're reporting to higher people in the organisations, what do those things mean, and then what are the cause and effects around those different decisions that we're making. Obviously, without leakage, we have to talk about lack of definition, and I think Ian will be touching on that point ever so slightly later. The vast majority of them are all lagging indicators, so we did this, not we're going to do this. And how do you sort of, as a leakage managers, how do we plan for those? There was a lot of things around conflicting KPIs, again, not having harmony around how the KPIs work together, and especially this almost got up to the ODIs where people couldn't see how the 3-hour rule, the burst and the leakage harmonise one way of working, off what I'm sure we'll say differently, but the viewpoint of the people on the ground was they can't see how that's working. So maybe there's a lack of sight to those. We don't have the data, and again, some of the smart meter data that we're coming through is showing that potentially the data that we did have, we shouldn't trust, or is different to the insights that we're actually providing from that data that we're looking at. There was a lot of people saying that there was too many of these KPIs, and that they were the KPI dashboards, etc., that we get these days. There was too many, and it wasn't sort of boiled down to 1 or 2 or 3 sort of numbers, which I think was important. And then one that came out almost universally was the one reason or another operations teams and operatives completely mistrust these KPIs. They are seen as a stick to hit people with, not a carrot for good performance. And I think that's one of the things that, again, this isn't just a journey of what the right data is, it's also how do we do the change management to get those people on board. The team are looking at a number of different KPIs at the moment, and again, won't go through all of these. We haven't quite figured out exactly how to do all of these. Again, so you'll see technology efficiency index. What that might exactly boil down to at the end of the day, we need to have a look at. But again, it's looking at how these things like technologies improve. And again, we've got some more on those. And again, it's not just on the guys in the field, it's also looking at the targeting effectiveness. So are we sending people to the right place and the right time? So looking at the whole process. And that's why the quality of repairs need to be in there. There is, at the moment, AI that will look at the pictures and sort of say, this is a good repair, this is a bad repair. At the moment, it's not 100% correct, and it's not getting it 100% right. However, this is the sort of thing where potentially in the future, that's where we need to push to. It might not be today, but again, it might not be that far away. And then there's also things that it's not just the people in the room, but at the same time, it is the people in the room. We're all customers to water companies. We all potentially have leaks, as Dean has shown, or issues with our properties, and how quickly do we in the room actually sort of respond to those, being informed people that understand exactly what's going on, understand that it's really bad, and understand that it's not the greatest thing in the world to do. How do we actually go about resolving those? And we're the informed people. If you look at the wider sector and the wider customer base, How long is it actually taking some customers to resolve that, and can we reduce that through customer-centric type approaches? So moving on to the sort of the trial process, and again, this is very much a proposal at the moment. This will be going out to the water companies to get feedback, and we'll also be talking around it at the Leakage Suppliers meeting that Future Water Association are running in February to look at how we actually do a trial process. And again, this might look very cumbersome for one company. The thought processes around this is that we collect as much data as possible so that only each technology has to be reviewed once, okay? So this isn't a Affinity do a trial, Thames do a trial, Southwest do a trial. This is Affinity do a trial, and everyone takes the data. Everyone does that sharing, everyone does the innovation piece, and this is the way sort of we get to that position. So one of the things that we definitely need to do is baseline these things. I've done a number of trials when I was at Affinity where we went, yep, we'll throw it in, see what it does, and yep, reduce leakage. Fantastic. From what baseline? Was it a high baseline anyway? We were just coming out of winter. We did it in spring. Leakage was going to reduce anyway, probably. How do these things work? We need to normalise areas as well. These are almost as sort of like what is the weather, spare repair speeds, and take out all of those other external factors. We need to determine what data we need to collect at the beginning, not halfway through. And so this is all about the planning stages and making sure that we understand these things. We also need to make it so that collecting this data doesn't mean that the operative's time is 15 times longer than it would normally be because they're collecting all of this data. So how do we make it so that we collect data in an appropriate and quick fashion? We performed the trial for an appropriate length of time. I say some of the trials that I did, 2 weeks, fantastic, it worked. That was enough. Some of them were 6 months. We need to understand how long these things need to be. And one of the things that we'll be looking at is the trials that people have done, what is the appropriate length for different types of technology. Then we need to analyse results, what worked, what the issues were. We all hear about the good bits that we've all done, but we hear very little, and I don't think anyone will be standing up here over the next day and a half to say, well, we did this, guys, and it didn't work. Don't do it. Didn't work, don't try it. So we need to learn from the bits where it hasn't worked, as well as those times when it has worked. A failure is just as an important piece of data as a passes. And then we need to share. We need to go out and say, this is what we found, this is all the data. Again, the cost data we need to sort of be wary of in that, and so this is very much just performance data in that respect. But we share that and make sure that all the water companies are aware of how it works, what the caveats are around it. It worked in this area, it didn't work in this area, that type of approach. So now we get on to Mend. I think we were described as a band a couple of years ago. And so after her rhyme last year, musical differences mean that that Jo has gone for a solo tour to New Zealand, and so could not be with us this evening. But she's left us some information, and by all accounts, she's very much enjoying life down under, where the weather is much better than it is here, I understand. So again, the asset management was very much around what's been the 3R rule, interruptions to supply, but very much about proactive interruptions, not the reactive, a burst has happened, we need to get on that. So very much looking at how we look at interruptions to supply in a proactive manner, not in a reactive manner. So we've done some initial work around what's in the business plans, so what everyone in the room and their companies have written about. We've also looked at some of the feedback that the likes of CC Water and Ofwat have published around the interruptions to supply. And then we were looking at that and preparing a position paper that will say, well, actually, we could potentially save X amount of money or Y amount of money if we went down this route. And I know that Sam's going to be looking at some of these bits in a bit more detail, but from a different skew in the next next hour or so. So where are the quality issues coming from? And this is a really big root cause diagram that we went through at the workshop that we held in January because it got very cold and all of a sudden there was lots of interruptions to supply, and so we decided to cancel the interruptions to supply workshop. But all of these different things from innovation are causing interruptions to supply potentially. Again, quality control not being good enough causing interruptions to supply. Installers, training, specifications, procurement. Lots of these factors are causing these issues, but what is it that's causing the main issues around these things when we're looking to renew assets rather than repair assets? So when you look at the business plans, some of these things, and again, all anonymous, but again, these are all in the publicly facing bits. Customers are concerned about major disruption of 2 days plus. Very little about less than sort of 3 hours, less than 8 hours if it's proactively put forward. Younger bill payers desire more mains replacement. People of a younger generation are very much seeing that all the articles that they're seeing in the papers that the industry isn't doing enough, and so they would like to see more to protect it for what they see as the assets that they have to take on. Having said that, planned interruptions are all right, unplanned interruptions are not acceptable to customers in any way, shape or form, and the level of percentages that they're calling a 99.9999 recurring almost type acceptance that unplanned interruptions. There's a lot of things that say innovation are needed to reduce the carbon load from renewals, and again this is one of the things that sort of pushes forward that this innovation and different types of renewal techniques and the carbon reduction, how do those work together with interruptions? Again, mains renewals will be needed, and again, we've got a slide on that next. One thing that was interesting to me specifically was that the impact on non-households is far, far higher, and the non-household community is seeing that as a much, much higher impact percentage than they would. And again, that's if water isn't there, they have to close, and the loss of livelihood is one of those issues that really has to be looked at. So, a high-level business plan assessment, based on the PR24 figures, the people in the room are going to replace approximately 8,000 kilometres during AMP8. This works out about 0.4% of the network each year, and still puts asset life of over 225 years. As many of you know, I've done a lot of work in my time about degradation of polyethylene. Not even polyethylene pipes will last that long based on what we know at the moment. Definitely not the joints. The bits of pipe in the middle might not even last that long as well. So that's an issue that we need to look at. Potentially we're being stopped by these sort of issues. So that's estimated to cost £6 billion. That's based on our cost benefit analysis that we've done for certain companies. And again, just to put that into context, that's the same total investment as Affinity Water and South East Water are putting in their plans combined, just on mains renewals. 2 largest water owning companies, just on mains renewals. Based on the work that we've done for certain companies, and again, some of the work that Joe's done, that could be lowered to as much as 4 billion. So 2 billion saving, or 2/3 of the cost, if more online replacement could be done, which requires longer than 3 hours. So this is things like enhanced lining solutions, very much looking at slip lining, pipe bursting, these sort of solutions that were used previously, and so we know what the risks are associated with them, and then they would move forward in that respect. So this piece of work is very much probably a little bit behind the others, as Joe's over in New Zealand. There will be another workshop in the new year, which will be done remotely, where Joe will be looking for more insight and more views from people. So please do look out for that. And with that, I'm going to hand back to David, I think.
Thank you very much, Joe. Just looking at questions we've got coming on Slido. We've got quite a few here. There's just a request for the AV team. I don't know whether you've seen it, about trying to stay focused on the slides longer for those online. Whether that can be done. Good, thumbs up from the back. Thank you. Right, last of the sessions now for this slot. Going to hand over to Glenn again. Talk about the decision-making framework.
Thanks, David. Yeah, final bit of this this session. Just me talking a little bit about the decision framework, and I'll just explain what we're actually sort of referring to here. I think when we published the Routemap, we kind of had sort of missed the boat to a certain extent in terms of business plans, WRMPs. Things were already at sort of quite an advanced stage, but I think now we're at the right point in the cycle to just have a bit of input into that. And what we're not talking about here is rip everything up and start again. We might all have different views on, the overall approach, sort of regulatory sort of guiding principles, etc. That's not what we're about here. It's not to get into that sort of territory. It's to say we've got an economic regulator, we've got an environmental regulator. Both require sort of two different planning processes. I think over time, as we've sort of moved into this territory with leakage, it's becoming, I think, more and more critical to make the right decisions. So this is just a short piece to say, over time, we've had a number of different drivers around leakage targets. There we've got the sort of familiar PESTLE sort of framework there: political, environmental, social, legislative, technological, and environmental. Fair to say we've sort of gone from a long period of time post privatisation. We've got two environmentals on there. Just realised one should be economic. We've gone a long time where costs and benefits have been really sort of key to setting leakage targets. The SELL, the ELL, particularly short run costs and benefits. That was a core principle behind leakage targets for many sort of years, until suddenly PR19 came along, and then the whole thing has sort of changed very rapidly. So we've got a combination of environmental pushers. We've got a change in the political landscape there. We've arguably got a lot of changes with technological drivers as well. There's a lot more technology out there that can be deployed to tackle the problem. So lots of things combining there to sort of really shift the emphasis, which has resulted in the EIP targets, which are very stretching now to deliver the 50% reduction by 2050. But I think what we just wanted to sort of pick up here was some of the challenges around the current planning process, and I think, as I said, by spring it'll be a good time to sort of just get out there with some of the messaging, because if we don't influence things now, I think it'll be too late again. So particularly focused on things like the WRMP here. Setting the baseline, that's one of the sort of bits that doesn't really perhaps get the scrutiny it deserves. Doesn't really necessarily think about the future being sort of different. We all know there's things like population growth, and that network unfortunately doesn't tend to be completely leak-free, and that's another topic that we have got covered tomorrow. There's the UCWE project looking at PE pipes, for instance, which is trying to address some of those challenges. But unfortunately, that is a potential upward pressure. Equally, there can be some downward pressures. Metering can be helpful. What about climate change impacts, etc.? But also, what about supply pipe deterioration? It's a pretty big known unknown in the equation there. Another challenge is that discrete options, particularly with demand management, they're rarely done in isolation. So you can start off with one option, make a saving, but by the time you've done the first option, if you're deploying the second, third, fourth option within a particular system, you can start to eat into that saving. So there's a danger if you've got a process that wants you to get into a very granular level, breaking those options down for visibility purposes and transparency, that you then end up potentially having some very complicated interrelationships to think about. And those interrelationships, they can be quite tricky to handle. So I think that's really key, just to sort of say, There's a potential to overstate the potential benefits if you're not careful in the current process. So, how optimal is the WRMP when you've got all of these complexities going on the demand management side of things? So, just finally on this topic, we've gone from having historically the ELL input into the WRMP not particularly well integrated. We've shifted to having a lot of granular detail in there, but it's not that helpful in terms of decision making. It's not easy to necessarily get the right leakage strategy out of that process. So possibly the future is heading towards more of a sort of a Routemap style policy options type approach, where you might have a technological view of your leakage reduction pathway, or an asset management focused, and go with a few different sort of leakage scenarios that avoids that risk of overlapping benefits feeding into the process. So that bit is really it in terms of the decision making process. It's just to really get some views coming together from sort of industry, just with a sort of a helpful informing of the process for the future sort of regulatory cycles. And that's it from me.
Great, thank you to the panel for the questions. So, time for you guys to ask now questions. Have we got any questions in the room? It's always the moment of deathly silence. Okay, while you're thinking about that, we'll start to one that's coming online then. So, this is probably for Dean mostly, but all of you can have an answer. Should we redefine water company leakage as leakage up to the customer boundary in line with other countries? And I guess smart metering really does maybe take us down that journey to doing that.
Good question. Thank you, David, or whoever put that. It's an interesting question, I think. We can measure, when we have smart meters in the ground, how much continuous flow is going past the boundary. So therefore, that helps, once we get the coverage of smart meters, it has to be said, that helps then define exactly how much leakage is on the company's infrastructure. So I think it's a useful thing to think about and a useful thing to quantify. Once you get across the customer boundary, there is going to be quite a lot of uncertainty as whether it's actually part of leakage or whether it's part of consumption. And that's important in terms of what you report in terms of leakage or consumption, but also how you actually tackle that to reduce it, because you probably require two different skill sets to reduce either. So you might imagine a future where if you look at the signal coming from smart meters, you may be able to interpret whether it's more likely to be one or the other, but I think there's still going to be a bit of doubt. So actually quantifying it up to that boundary is certainly going to help, because then that removes one part of the network you're looking for. And then thinking about how you reduce that going forward, then do you need a different skill set of people going out and looking at continuous flows? Ones who can actually look at both what's going on underground and within the home.
Certainly makes it nice and clean, doesn't it, having that demarcation point?
Yeah.
And you guys want to come in? We'll move on to the next one. Okay, also, same sort of subject. Oh, sorry.
So sorry, Dan Lewis from Cube Satellites. I missed the Slido code. Could I just ask, how important is the time factor in locating a leak in terms of what is the threshold? So is it just to do with the cost of the water lost, or does the length of the leak being in place actually make it a much more expensive repair?
Yeah, it's with all leakage, it's not just the instantaneous loss, it's how long that leak has been running. So every day that hole or that leak is losing more water. So the sooner you can repair it, then the sooner you can eliminate that leak from the system, and your leakage will reduce. You also obviously get breakout of leaks as well. That's the counter argument, which so leaks will break out all the time, and you fix leaks all the time. So when you're holding leakage steady, you're just sort of maintaining a steady state condition. To actually drive that down, you've got to reduce the runtime of those leaks so that you can stop more water escaping from the system. So it is quite important. So in terms of looking at this data, it becomes important how quickly you can spot that. So initially you've got lots of leaks or lots of continuous flows to actually go out and target, because we haven't really looked at that part of the system in this way before. But once you start to get rid of the biggest ones, it's then about tracking the breakout, so the sooner you get that information coming back to you, the sooner you can identify those biggest leaks and go out and get them fixed.
Thank you, Dean.
Frank van der Kleij, Stantec. I suppose it's a question for Joe, but maybe also a bit more general. You mentioned that there's potential several billion pounds of savings to be achieved if the planned element of customer minutes loss is either relaxed or removed from the CML side of things. Are you aware, has there been any discussion with Ofwat around that particular metric? Because obviously there's a real customer benefit in there, and if customers are already accepting that planned interruptions are acceptable up to a certain extent, has there been any discussion about removing that element from the CML metric?
Well, it was in Ofwat asked the question as part of their methodology piece of work there, and again, Ian might be better placed to sort of like talk about the wider things. I've had conversations with Ian on this sort of subject. I think the one thing that's quite key is and again, the work that's been done by CC Water is that even planned interruptions for a certain demographic of population are unacceptable, but it's not for everybody. So if you sort of target those people where, again, things like dialysis or the frail, where not having water for 8 hours is a significant impact, you target those with your interventions and innovate around those interventions while you're still sort of like doing some of the technologies that we were doing in AMP5, AMP3 type thing, where we know are fairly low risk and fairly low cost. Those are potentially the innovations we need to be looking at, rather than trying to innovate ways of renewing an asset, which is, as I say, it's got to be there for 225 years at the rate we're going. That's a long time to sort of look at it. And again, from a material point of view, you look for that length of time and you start looking at some nasties that the DWI won't like. So you've got to balance off all of these things to make it the most appropriate for all of the regulators and also for the customers as well.
Thank you. Jez.
Jez from SES. So firstly, just on that last point, worth noting UU, I believe the only water company who've actually put in their PR24 plan that they will go for an 8-hour interruption on planned works. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens with that one. Just going back on the Routemap though, when the Routemap was formed, there was an assumption made about climate change and about how that would affect that path coming down. And part of that assumption is that massive breakout events would be comparatively rare. Given the last couple of years, are we going to have to change our assumptions on that?
Potentially, but then again, that's why we put in an adaptive pathway approach, is that we're on a potentially different pathway to the one that we anticipated 2 years ago. So do we have to look at it again? No. Do we need to modify where we're looking at? Possibly.
I think the other thing that comes out is your ability to react to those events quickly, Jez. So when we look back at, we talk about winter events from leakage point of view, but we also get summer peak events in terms of total demand and also leakage. And I know for sure that certainly Thames and Anglian in the summer of 2022, which, as well as having a cold snap in December, we had a really hot July in 2022. We're looking at smart meter data to identify those properties with the highest continuous flows, to try and intervene in those quickly to reduce demand in parts of the network, to alleviate potential outages in those networks. So, we are seeing a higher frequency of hot summers, a different frequency of cold snaps, and And cold snap's affecting the network quite severely, even though they aren't as severe as some of the worst we've had in history. You know, if we go back to 2009, 10, 11, we had some really cold weather for several years that had a big impact on the network. And 2022 was there was a freeze and there was a thaw, but it was nowhere like the previous ones we'd seen, and it still has quite a big impact. And some of that is very clearly on the customer side of the boundary. We saw that in some of the data from both Thames and Anglian. So I think being able to react quickly, which means having the monitoring systems in place to pick that up quickly, and coming back to the how quickly do you need to find these things? Well, in that scenario, the quicker you can find those properties that are bursting, the quicker you can start talking to the customer to work out how you're going to get that closed down quickly.
Tanya.
Hi there, Tanya Dady from Dayworth Consulting. One of the final stages of the leakage route map is the adoption of customer supply pipes. First question is, do you guys see that happening, and if so, when? And then a follow-up question from that is, if we're all installing smart meters at the property boundary, do you see a secondary installation of a smart meter internally should we adopt the customer supply pipes?
I knew there'd be a question on customer supply pipes. It's clearly an issue. We've got, nobody knows exactly, but probably 200,000 kilometres of supply pipe out there, which is completely unmanaged. It's actually the last delivery bit of the pipe to get the water to the property, so that is a risk. But it's not owned by water companies, it's owned by the property owner. Not many property owners understand that, and hence why we see some leaks running for a very long time on those while negotiations go forward between water companies and customers. But I think it needs to be dealt with. How it's dealt with, I'm not sure, and we've had lots of discussions with various people recently about this. Do we go back to let's adopt supply pipes, which is what happened back in 2010 with DEFRA's consultation, which landed on the no side, saying it's just going to be too expensive and too risky. There might be some more innovative solutions in terms of partial ownership, or does the insurance company play a bigger role in encouraging customers to put devices on their properties to identify internal losses more quickly? Underground supply pipe leakage affects the insurance companies because of subsidence and that sort of thing. So, I think it definitely needs looking at. Is the answer wholesale ownership? I'm not so sure. Then we must be able to look at a wider range of potential solutions these days, particularly once we start to know where those leakages occur or those losses occur. So it does definitely need looking at. But what the solution is, I don't really know.
I think it sits as well with the question around what is leakage, because it could all get wrapped up in that definition of, do we continue with total leakage as a definition as it is? So I think really where this one sort of needed to go, that sort of 2009-10 look at it from government was almost a different generation. That sided, I think, all the stakeholders pretty well pulled together and said, we think adoption would be the sensible thing to do. And it was about, at that time, a £4 a year on customer bills. It was expensive, but it wasn't kind of something that would cause too big an issue for the customer. But it was then the financial crisis at the time meant that didn't get taken up by the coalition government. We're now sort of 12, 13 years on from that, and it's still a really thorny problem. So I think something's needed. We could collectively, as water company people, as consultants, probably put a view together. That might well say that adoption's the easiest thing to do here. If we think about the highly sort of political landscape that we're in at the moment, probably the best thing would be a DEFRA-led, government-led consultation that factored in the stakeholder views. What do the customers themselves want? What does the insurance industry think about it? Because you could sort of go down that route as well. It could also be a tidying up of Water Industry Act and definitions. What is leakage? Why don't we align with the rest of the world and report distribution side and leave the customer side to the customer and do it all as a big tidying up exercise? So I think, yeah, personally, I'd say that'd be the way to go. Would be a big consultation, but make it big enough, and also think about whether it's distribution or supply pipe in the process at the same time.
Great, thank you, gents. We're out of time, unfortunately, so thank you for all your questions. In terms of next steps, you guys are finishing the work you're doing sometime in the new year, before the end of the financial year. We then need to start to think about, well, what other projects do we need to do to help us deliver our PR24 plans. So with that, I think a round of applause for the panel. And hand back off.
And also on top of that, I think a round of applause for the chair of the panel. So thanks once again to David, Glenn, Dean and Joe for that really stimulating conversation. And now we've got Ian who's going to join us. Ian Pemberton from Ofwat, who is the Principal Engineer in Water Engineering Science and Technology at Ofwat, and he is going to talk about things that came up probably in that conversation about the regulator's perspective. So it's a really big pleasure for us to have Ian here as a speaker, so give him a big round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I sat there biting my lip thinking I mustn't talk about PR24 during that question session. So my apologies if you expected that I might be able to give you some sneak previews of what's going on the PR24 process. Two reasons for that. One is obviously the confidentiality and making that go through its due process. And the second, I'm not involved with it. What I am going to talk to you about today is some of the learning that I and we have picked up through the in-period determination and the APR, the performance reviews, and also some of the key things that's coming out of some of the casework that we're now doing. Again, no spoilers on anything from the casework. That will go through its natural process. I've been in this sector for fewer years than Bob, but 30 odd years. And I recognise some faces, but each year I see more and more new people. So it's probably worth saying I joined Ofwat in 2016 after what seemed like a whole career in consulting engineering. So I've been involved in leakage since '94, when managing leakage was produced. And I guess I am the poacher turned gamekeeper. So I've got some of the experience, but maybe some of that is maybe it's a bit rusty. Hence me coming along to conferences like this, and I pick some stuff up as well. Right. Do you know where that quote comes from? It's my favourite quote in the world. I should be able to stand up here and quote Tolstoy or Dostoevsky. That's from Jurassic Park. And I think it's brilliant. Jeff Goldblum turned around and goes, your scientists were so preoccupied to working out if they could, they never stopped to think if they should. A question for you. Is leakage a calculation or is it an estimation? Who thinks that it is a calculation? Who thinks it's an estimation? Wow, okay. 30 years post-privatisation, 200 of the finest minds in leakage. Can't calculate it. Wow, okay. So, given it's an estimate, here's a second question for you. How accurately do you think we're estimating it? You're estimating it now. So, starting from the top, who thinks it's within plus or minus 30%? As in, better than that. So there's a significant proportion around the room who think that the estimation is worse than that. Yeah? Is that right? I'm very surprised. I'm genuinely surprised. Okay. Who thinks it's better than 5%? Nobody. Okay. Do we think that that is what the public understands from leakage and leakage calculations and leakage estimations? Do you think it's good enough? I just wanted to do this this little sort of diagram. From my learning from Ofwat, from the 7 years I've been there, Ofwat regulates the appointed business, the exec, the appointee, the directors of that business, the few people who are absolutely named at Companies House and who are the owners of that business. Those appointees, this is going to be a very typical structure, but I really want to make the point anyway. We have my colleagues and my leaders will be discussing with the appointees, with the board, with the businesses. They have a very good relationship at that. But when it comes down to, I'm guessing most of the people in this room, myself included, the kind of the people on the ground, the people who are actually delivering, actually doing the work, setting the strategy, working out what their reporting is. Other than these sessions and the occasional invite that we get to come out and see your operations, we don't have a lot of interaction, do we? There's not an awful lot going on there. I'm thinking of the 30 odd years that I worked in consulting engineering before I joined Ofwat, and I think I met them twice in that time, So there really is there's layers to this onion, there's layers to the communication, there's layers to this messaging. And really, what I want to really highlight here is the importance of that communication through your organizations. And the fact is that we only see it. We only see the APRs. We only see the business plans. We see when there's engagement that maybe it goes wrong. So internal audit and the people, when you're setting your targets and you're reporting upwards and you're reporting where you've achieved to, and the communications and the processes that you've been through, it's really important that you actually are fully engaged with both your internal auditors and your regulatory teams, and the final line of defense is the external assurance. And the reason for that is buried deep down in the licenses, this condition P. It really is ridiculously buried and ridiculously powerful. This is the duty on the licensee, and there's two. We'll come on to condition P as well, condition M, sorry, as well. But basically, it's a bit like health and safety law, in that if somebody has an accident on site, somebody has done something wrong. There's kind of no defense to say, that nothing went wrong because somebody's got hurt. There was a reportable incident. Something has gone wrong in that system. And it's exactly the same here, really. The analogy that I draw with condition P is that if there is a problem, and it's a proven problem, then the chances are, in all probability, that somewhere on condition P has been breached, and that then puts the duty on us to investigate and the duty on us to enforce and to create a financial outcome. So why should companies worry about complying? Well, I think it's three ways, really. Firstly, it's doing the right thing. We're all here to do a good job. We're all here to do the right thing. We all want to do the right thing. We know it's there, and I don't think that anybody has got any doubt about that. The intention is good, Intention is good across the sector. The intention is good across regulators, companies, supply chain. We all want to do the right thing. The sector's under unbelievable scrutiny at the moment. So all the more reason why we would want to go in there to apply to that additional scrutiny. And then I don't think anybody from the regulator side underestimates how disruptive, is probably the wrong word, how much effort needs to go into information requests if we do choose to launch a formal investigation. You can imagine there is hoops to go through from our side before we'd even consider launching an investigation. It's not something that you just do lightly. So when that letter lands on your reg director with section 203, it's serious at that point. And the section 203 is of the Water Industries Act stops the clock, which is at that point it is a criminal offence to interfere with any of the evidence in that. It's an automatic criminal offence to do that. I'm not saying for 1 second it happens, but I'm just just raising the awareness of this isn't just an information request. It's akin to a police or an HSC investigation. And if that then goes on from an investigation into enforcement action, we have the powers and the duty to create a financial outcome which is beneficial to customers, and that can be up to 10% of the turnover of the sector, so of the water side of your businesses if you're water and sewage companies. So it's pretty significant. So let's look at the in-period determinations and the APR analysis, which has kept me awake over summer this year, going through and making sure that what's actually happened through those companies. In 22-23, half the sector has not achieved its leakage target. Half the companies represented here haven't achieved the leakage target. That doesn't necessarily mean that we haven't done enough effort. You could read into that actually Ofwat has done a brilliant job in setting those targets really hard, that roughly, so nobody's sailing on through. I'm not sure I draw that conclusion. But you could also say, coming back to this condition P, are the company's execs making the right resources available to you? Are you making the right decisions about the reporting that you put up to the exec? Was it an unusual, part of the reason we're moving to the 3-year rolling average is to take those peaks out. Was it exceptional weather last 3 years? Well, we've had COVID, that's there, and it was a hot summer, and we have had free stores. Exceptional? Or the new norm? What's it going to be? And then the other way to look at it would be, my econometric colleagues call it gamification. When you look and you say, if I do this, it'll have this impact, but if I do that, it'll have this impact, and that one has less impact overall than this one. Therefore, if we report this, that's the least impact across the whole of the section. So I'm not drawing any conclusions there. I'm just saying that actually there is, the stuff that we would look at and we would start to think about how that's being reported. As part of that in-period determination in the APR process, we don't do any forensic analysis of your leakage figures. As part of that process, the APR comes to us with 3 lines of assurance. It's gone through your own internal audit, it's gone through your own quality checks, and there will be a third-party external independent assessment of what what's been reported there. More than a third of the sector have restated leakage figures in the last 3 years, in the first 3 years of this AMP. The guidance says that's fine. It is fine. But I come back to this condition P having the appropriate levels of control in place to operate your networks, operate your business, and then that bit down in the blue box there, the condition M. What that says in legalese is we have the right and the duty to expect you to tell us the truth, the best picture, the right story, the right picture, which is, you know, and if that's the case, you're turning around and saying, for those third of the companies, I now got new information which says that what I reported last year is not the best picture. That's fine. Absolutely 100% that's fine. But it also kind of just sets the cogs going in terms of, so when they reported last year that they had efficient systems and efficient monitoring and condition P compliance, just sets the cogs going. I was talking to the speakers just beforehand, and I wish I'd put the on the graphic there. You know that at the fairground when you hit the hammer down and you try and hit the bell. You know, all these things, you're hitting the hammer, and when it hits the bell, that's when Ofwat launches an investigation. So all these things, you're just going, does that stack up? Does it stack up? Is it the right picture? Is it the best information that we've got? In 22-23, more than 2/3 of the companies here are reporting a water balance gap of more than 2%. Our reporting guidance is just that, it's guidance. It's not mandatory. There's an ownership model where government tells you how to run the business, and that's not what we've got with the privatised water sector. There is definitely, the expertise is on the floor here. Yeah, but we're not seeing sufficient level of compliance with the water balance gap. And this is some slides that I put together to show the non-engineers, some of the components of the water balance and what happens there. And with blue being real data, so on the left-hand side you've got a top-down balance, which is looking at the the real data that you've got and the calculation of top-down leakage. Then the bottom-up, the components of your night line. The orange bits are the assessed bits, the estimated bits. And if we're now at the point of saying the water balance gap is more than 2%, where are the errors? Realistically, from my perspective, they're in the components which are estimated through through statistical samples and through statistical surveys. So that then comes back to the whole of this framework of what Ofwat sees, what we look at, where we go, condition M, condition P. Are we happy that there's the right picture being reported? I think I've just got a couple more slides. That external assurance is as good as the brief that you've given to those assurers. And what we would typically read in the APRs says something along with a lawyer drafted clarification and whatever you want to call it, the caveat in there, which very clearly says, on the basis of the information that's been provided to us, we have no reason to believe that this is not the right figure, on the basis of the information that we've got, or even on the basis of the brief we were given. or even on the basis of the brief that we have been told. So that third-party assurance is as good as the brief that you've given to them. And in that, there are many components in that auto balance, and many components where we have put some guidance down as to what the degrees of accuracy could and should be. And if you are in a place where you might be reporting something different to that, then you are potentially opening yourself up to scrutiny. So my last slide was just readdressing what I'd shown there in terms of the interaction, and just to say, that the non-engineers, the lawyers, the enforcement people, the casework people, the accountants and the economists in Ofwat are looking at the picture macroscopically, and they're looking at it through that lens of particularly those two conditions, condition P and condition M. Have you given us the right information? Do you have the right systems in place? Thank you.
You've got some questions.
I thought you might.
Some time for some questions, Ian. I think we've got the mics around the room. Yeah, we have. So we've got two over here. Joe.
Thank you, Ian. Very interesting. Joe Sanders, RPS. What's your feelings on your criteria when a third-party body is providing poor data, such as potentially Mosul providing poor data to the industry, which is different to what we thought it would do in 2016 when the guidance was set?
Gosh, that's a question. This is my view. I'm not sure this is something I've ever discussed in Ofwat. Would be that the company would be using best available data, so that actually, if it is the best available data, the real issue would be is if you know something and you choose to report something else because the guidance says you can report that's quite serious. If you're looking at it and saying, the occupancy data in these houses, the CACI data, whatever it is wrong, the Mosul data is wrong, meters are under reading. If it's got a reasonable argument with it, then we have no issue. So I think it's the, but I think that's then for something for the companies to take up with Mosul and to say, actually, you're placing us at risk. Yeah.
Okay, I think we had one other down here from Dean.
Hi, Ian. Dean Marshall, Artesian Consulting. Interesting opening question, I thought. Is it a calculation or an estimation?
I'm quite surprised by the answer, if I'm honest, in the room.
But I like the way you tied it back at the end to the biggest points of estimation being those components that you can't actually measure, because you'll always have some estimation, even in the measurement, but
yep.
we have some quite big components that are estimated. So you then talked about companies restating, changes in methodology, which require a restatement, required a backcast for some considerable time. Is that stifling innovation? Is a question I have. We're about to enter an AMP where a lot of companies are going to put a lot of smart meters in the ground, and they're going to. And so at the moment, the use of that smart meter data in the methodology isn't embedded because they haven't got the technology in the ground. Are they going to have to wait until AMP9 before they can start using that to report their leakage?
No, I don't think so. I think it's down to that reasonable case and best available data and best available knowledge and information. I think the point I would make is that to take a healthy, cynical view as to how can information I'm gathering now in 2023 give me a better picture, because bear in mind the baselines for now is going back 3 years, pre-1920 because of the 3-year average. So is it credible that the new information I'm getting now in 2023 gives me a better picture of what my leakage was 7 years ago? And if it is, because the consumption elements or the components stack up, then fine, absolutely fine. But it's just that, it's that degree of critical analysis that I think I would appeal for.
Okay, I'm going to go to the Slido questions now. There are quite a few of them coming through. And by the way, we are running a bit late on this session, but I sense that there's a lot of interest in what Ian has said, so we'll probably have to cut a little bit out of the coffee break for that. So, Ian.
I can just give you yes/no answers if you want, Bob. No.
Well, you might have a yes/no answer to this question. The current MLE calculation is complicated and possibly not the best method. Is it time to use the IWA method, like most of the rest of the world? That's a big question, isn't it?
I have no knowledge that it will change for PR24. I would agree that as a PR29 exercise, we should be looking at improving that. That's my personal view, and that's something I'm pushing for internally in Ofwat. And whether that becomes a new guidance from us, whether it's an Acquia project, whether it's a WRC or a club contract, I have no idea. But no, I think the MLE calculation, as per managing leakage 94, probably needs a revisiting. Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's a fair answer. So here's a really controversial one, just before we break. Do you believe that there is a lack of trust between Ofwat and water companies? If so, why do you think this exists and how can it be improved? Powerful stuff, eh? Is there a mistrust? No. Is there a commercial benefit to having that information asymmetry? Yes. Yes. You know, we are setting the price limits on the basis of the questions we're asking, and if we're doing our job well, we're setting them quite tight and setting some quite challenging processes and quite challenging targets. And if we're doing our job right, we're setting the incentives right as well to under and outperform. So it's a bit, you know, I wouldn't say there's a mistrust. Certainly not from Ofwat's perspective. I think there is there's a recognition of that information asymmetry and a recognition of trying to set some targets based on, you know, incomplete data from our side. And then also the flip side of that is the obligation to not place unnecessarily regulatory burden on the organisations. So we can't just ask for everything, you know, we have to be pointed in what we ask for.
Yeah, I would say that's a particular issue for smaller companies like mine with the same one-size-fits-all kind of process we have. Okay, let's have a quick look at these. Okay, nothing. There are some more here, but any others on we're not going to get through all of these. So, any more from the floor? Okay, let's have a quick look through one last question here. Do you think that presenting the leakage figures as percentage change in baseline helps customer understanding of leakage position?
The leakage figures are also reported in more conventional terms in the APRs. So the fact that we use that as the measure, and the measure for looking at what the PC performance is and the ODIs, I think is kind of, that's an internal thing. From what I've seen in all the APRs, everyone says what their leakage figure is anyway, which I think is what the customers want and what they want to see. So I don't think that metric as it stands is necessarily customer centric, but I think the information is there in the APRs anyway.
Yeah, I think we in the sort of the technical people in leakage have always said percentage numbers are not a good way to express it, yet we also recognise there is a challenge with getting customers on board and understanding these things. So there's a bit of a tension, I would say, between those two areas that we need to solve in some way.
And an absolute figure in a report probably doesn't give the picture of where the journey has been, does it? And where the company is on their aspirations.
Okay, well, I'll call things to a conclusion there on Ian's session. Please join me in thanking Ian for his really excellent presentation. Thank you, Ian. So we've run a little bit over schedule here. I think there's a break now, which you would have been back for at about 4:10. That seems a little bit tight. So should we say 20 minutes, 4:15? Yeah, that seems okay. All right, 4:15. See you then.